Well, hello and welcome everyone for the third installment of our series on 3D immersive learning. Welcome back if you've already come to one or more of our sessions. And if you haven't, we have two previous sessions that we've done, one on students as creators and one on students as explorers. The videos for those previous installments are available on the registration website, and I'll go ahead and drop the URL into the chat after we get started as well. Just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Jessica Millstone. I am the co-host of the almost 8,000 person New York EdTech Meetup. We're a professional networking organization here in New York supporting the EdTech ecosphere. And I'm also managing director at Copperwire Ventures, which is a new early stage investment fund supporting women-led tech companies. I'm really excited to have Anurupa and Ellie here to talk to us a little bit about 3D immersive environments and how they can support the teaching and learning of math and physics. I first met Anurupa as an entrepreneur pitching her product. And I genuinely have not been able to stop thinking about how the 3D space is so perfect for the kinds of teaching and learning that she's working on. I can't wait for her to show you how she's teaching math and physics in this space. And I can't wait to hear from Ellie to hear how it's working for teachers and students and the plans that she has for bringing this into the classroom. So as you've seen so far from this series, Anurupa is just one of the many women pioneers working in VR and education. My co-host for the online event today is Emily Jolie from Ape Lab, the creator of Zoe, VR software tool that allows students to create their own immersive experiences. Emily, I will let you take it from here.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. We're super excited for this week's webinar. And if you were here the past few weeks, I hope you enjoyed it. We're probably going to continue this adventure over summer. So, please feel free to join in, pitch in. You can also register on zoe.com to get more of those. So today we have Anurupa and Ellie, and they are in the first stages of building a virtual reality platform called Prisms VR. And as a former math and physics teacher, you'll tell us more, but she believes that algebra and physics can be much better understood in a 3D environment. And I fully agree, but I am also very curious and excited to understand a bit more about what this would look like. Personally, it would have helped me a lot to learn algebra and 3D and physics. So I'm just really excited to understand what you guys are building, where this is all going. So without further ado, I'll let you, give a warm welcome to both. Please use the Q&A to submit your questions. Anurupa, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica and Emily. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. You can give me a quick thumbs up if all is working well. Ooh, can you guys see my screen? Great. Okay, wonderful.
Good.
Great. So hi, everybody. I'm Anurupa, the founder and CEO of Prisms. Thank you so much, Jessica, Emily, and Zoe, for hosting this important series. I hope that for all of our audience members, by the end of this session, you'll have a deeper understanding of how the immersive platform that we're building at Prisms can be used to advance STEM learning in ways that, as Emily and Jessica mentioned, are impossible using current methods today, and in many cases, the way that we learned ourselves. So I'd like to start with a short introduction of my journey. As is the case for many educators, I know that we have many teachers in the audience. The prism that has shaped my thinking and orientation has been quite personal. I completed my education in electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. And during my time there, I observed a pretty disparate experience between those students who had a solid foundation in K-12 math and science and those who didn't. And it's those 6 years during my undergraduate and graduate work that really kicked off my lifelong love affair with STEM education reform and what it means for all students to attain success and contribute to these fields meaningfully. So though we are well versed in the problem, these numbers have been stagnant despite decades of investment in the space. And after 10 years of leading STEM teaching and learning across diverse systems, both here in the US and abroad, as a classroom teacher, as a curriculum developer, as well as a teacher developer, I can tell you that we're losing students at bottleneck moments in the K-16 STEM curriculum because two fundamental competencies are near absent in current approaches. First, the ability to create abstractions from physical and intuitive real-world experiences. So not experiences from a textbook or a paper, but from physical experiences that one goes through in their life. And second, spatial reasoning. Both of these are woefully underrepresented in our curriculum today, and yet are the number one and two predictors of success in post-secondary STEM. So as, again, many of us already know, the status quo is leaving a very large number of our students continuously relearning ideas because they never quite understood in the first place. Using static 2D tools to learn concepts that are actually three-dimensional, which has caused kids a lot of fatigue. They use the right-hand rule and they're using manipulatives, but it never quite helps them understand the 3D nature of a lot of the phenomena that they're learning. They're spending valuable time on contrived applications that don't really create emotional resonance for our kids and build enduring connections to the discipline. And they're learning in a one-size-fits-all environment. And so, as suggested, immersive learning, when pedagogically sound, really addresses these problems at the root to get at these attrition statistics that I was talking about, rather than just getting our kids past the next assessment or getting them past the SAT, which we have tools to do that. What we haven't really been able to figure out is how do we build much longer and lifelong connections to these disciplines. So at Prisms, we're building a standards-aligned, student-led virtual reality platform. We are currently in production and will be launching our first algebra and physics modules this fall. However, I do want to give you a window into our design and how our modules can be used to increase mastery on difficult to teach and difficult to learn topics for our students. So each of our modules has three parts. First, when students put the headset on, they're immersed in a compelling problem. And when I mean compelling, I mean really something that engages curiosity, it feels socially relevant, and it creates intellectual need to want to solve the problem. In the second part of our modules, they get to use a series of 3D sense-making tools that allow them to connect a physical experience to mathematical models, be it tables, graphs, equations, rather than jumping to those abstractions. And third, we really develop that procedural fluency and allow them to connect back to that conceptual wrestling they did with the 3D tools. In one of our physics modules on Lenz's law, which for those of you who are physics educators on this call, we know that kids just end up memorizing Faraday's law and Lenz's law. And when asked 2 to 3 years later, they have no idea what you're talking about. So in one of our modules, students are first immersed in a situation where they're on a high-speed train in Japan. And they're asked to get off at the next station, but the train misses that stop. So they're taken into a workstation to learn more about how this braking system works in a three-dimensional space. And they develop a conceptual understanding of Lenz's law. Students get to then derive Faraday's law, which is the negative derivative of the change in magnetic flux, from physical observations they made with the model braking system. So this equation that just seems doesn't really have a connection to, otherwise they have a very strong association with where it came from, and the hope is that they're going to remember that equation, for decades to come. I'm going to go ahead and just share a screen recording from that's been taken from our Oculus Quest to kind of give you a bit of a sense of what this looks like from the student's perspective. To really understand the full module, you'll need to be immersed and interact with and complete all the tasks as intended. But hopefully these excerpts will provide some insights. So here, in this lab space, students are working with a model electromagnetic braking system to understand how and why a braking effect occurs with this system. It's very simple. It's a conductive wheel, as you can see in front of you, with an electromagnet. And there, students can have an image of what it kind of looks like when that electromagnet is really connected to the wheels of the train. There's a voiceover right now that guides students through a series of tasks, but I've muted that for the purposes of this demonstration. So fast forwarding a bit, using their controllers, you can see here that students are able to set different strengths of the electromagnet and quickly observe that the higher the strength of the magnet, the faster the wheel comes to a stop. So here, students just get to see that very, very simple phenomenon. Okay, I'm changing the strength of the electromagnet and something is happening where the wheel is either slowing down more quickly or less quickly. So it's just a very informal observation. They then get to really observe the underlying phenomena that's causing this effect. And they're asked to consider the density of the magnetic field in different parts of the wheel. And so what they get to see here is that based on how far you are from the center of the magnet, you're going to have a higher density closer to the magnet and a lower density as you move farther away. Similarly, as you increase the strength of the magnetic field, you're going to see more lines. But as we know, a wheel is not stagnant. The wheel is moving when the train is moving, and we have to bring it to a stop. So once they get to kind of review the concept of magnetic flux, they get to actually see the wheel turning and observe how the magnetic flux is changing at different components. Here we have examples of multiple choice questions that they are answering as they go along. So there are checks for understanding. It's very important that students are able to memorialize learning. What we've learned from immersive learning is that kids can go through a series of exercises, but if we're not pausing to really solidify knowledge, then that knowledge will just kind of come and go. So this is the checks for understanding are a big part. And at this point, they begin to use their prior knowledge that now that we've seen that change in magnetic flux as the wheel started moving, they remember that, oh, a change in flux actually induces a current. And so they're able to think through the direction of the current at particular points of the wheel using their hands and their controller and receive immediate feedback on whether they're correct. There's actually a point I'll make in just a moment. I'll keep going for a second. If any questions come up, please write them down. I'll be happy to respond to them. Similarly, using their prior knowledge that a current induces a magnetic field, which is what you see in the yellow and the green line. So the little blue is showing the direction of the current, and the yellow and the green are showing the opposing magnetic fields. And they're able to determine the directions of the induced field using the right-hand rule. One thing that's really important to note here is one of the reasons why kids get so confused in physics is because we teach them all these rules, but we have them do it on, you know, on a 2D piece of paper. So here they are trying to figure out the right-hand rule of the magnetic field and the current, and it's very hard because they can't actually conceptualize it on their worksheet or their paper. So here, what they get to do is they get to use the right-hand rule in 3D, so they can kind of curl their fingers in the direction of the current, use their thumb, and their controllers are so intuitive that you can kind of do all of this movement and thinking holding the controllers. One thing I did want to just kind of note as a preamble, I'm jumping through different parts of the module, so you're not able to get that kind of step-by-step understanding. What was really important for me is just to kind of help you understand what are the different types of functionality, what are ways that VR can be used, but I'd be happy offline to actually go through the full module since it's much longer. So through these tasks, once they've discovered that these induced currents create these opposing magnetic fields, they formalize that the braking effect is occurring to oppose this change in the initial magnetic flux. So they're able to really kind of go through these series of tasks and articulate why that braking effect occurred and use that to define Lenz's law, which is, you know, a foundational law in a first-year physics class. But rather than reading or watching a video, they got to physically work with the module, take observations, submit responses to strategic questions, and really build their understanding. One point here is in our final product, which we're launching in the fall, our checks for understanding are not going to be multiple choice questions. They will be a slightly different and slightly more sophisticated model. But I wanted to note that what's very important is that there are these checkpoints as they go through so that they know and they can self-monitor against the learning outcomes for the module. The third part of the module, which is in production right now, has students actually taking measurements, so that the wheel that I just showed you that showed the flux, kids now get to take measurements, create a table, create a graph, all in VR, and then create an equation. Now, what's really important about this being in VR is it can go back and forth between the representations. So when they're constructing their table, they can go back to the physical model and go back and take those measurements and do some testing, like what was happening again in the model, and go back to their table. They can create their equation, and same thing, rather than kind of being one and done now, once they've generated their equation, they can go back and kind of go back and forth between representations, which is such a key skill in computer science and engineering. That was a quick overview that hopefully sheds light onto what we mean by building mathematical reasoning and science using VR. As mentioned, we're currently building our first algebra module as well. So my colleague, Ellie Toll, will share a brief design of that module, but you'll begin to kind of see a trend on how we approach designing abstract thinking. So Ellie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anurupa. My name is Ellie Toll, as Anurupa mentioned. I was previously an Algebra 2 teacher, and I'm a math curriculum developer for Success Academies. I am so excited to work for the PRISMS team. So the second module that we're going to take you through is currently in construction and will be launched with Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 teachers in September. When I was an Algebra 2 teacher, one of the most challenging topics for my students was logarithms. Despite using Desmos graphs and GeoGebra visualizations and applets, my students relied heavily on a superficial understanding of logarithms. And although they were able to develop fluency through memorization, by the time that they matriculated to pre-calculus the next year, they lost fluency and had to relearn logarithms all over again. Our PRISMS algebra module has been designed specifically to target and remediate the obstacles that students face when first learning about logarithms, while also exposing them to a relevant problem in STEM today. And in this module, we're exploring the exponential spread of a virus. So students begin by being immersed in a routine experience to a food hall. And here they're called upon to investigate a new virus that has suddenly spread across their city to ensure that the proper containment measures are taken. They go through daily interactions, and by using 3D models, they physically experience the spread of the virus and how the growth changes for different infection rates and social distancing protocols. Students use an immersive and intuitive graphing tool to help them to seamlessly navigate levels of abstraction. And as Anurupa mentioned with the physics module, going back and forth between the physical observation, mathematical representations, and finally equations to develop very robust abstract thinking skills, which is so challenging for our students to develop today.
Sorry about that. The last thing that I will share with you is, I don't know why this is not letting me do this, but I'm gonna just kind of do this again. Thanks all. The last notes I wanted to make was around what it really means for teachers to implement our modules as a part of their day-to-day. So each module is between 20 to 30 minutes and engages students in a bottleneck topic. One thing that's very important is that we've only chosen topics that are incredibly important to experience in 3D. Not all topics are, and happen to also be at the root causes of kind of poor understandings and drop-offs in the future. So our modules can run on the Oculus Quest for full interactivity. That's what you saw in the videos that I shared. So there you're able to interact with all 3D objects, really pick up and engage with your environment in a very intuitive way. However, all of our modules also run on the Google Cardboard as a 360 video. So you can still see the visualizations and the tasks. It's important for us that there's a lot of flexibility with how our modules can be integrated. So students can use at home, they're student led. So a student pops on a headset and can go through the entire module on their own. Or teachers can integrate into their daily instruction because we have a very robust data analytics platform that both allows a teacher to see and understand how a student is progressing through the different tasks, as well as post-module analytics. And we also in the future will be optimizing each student's experience based on what they are, any misconceptions or kind of early data around what works best for them. Also, just a very quick note here, we're looking at subject areas across middle school, high school, and university. I think it's very important not to feel like VR is just for older kids or for just younger kids. Of course, the design will be pedagogically sound as per the how old a student is, but we have modules in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade math and science, high school, calculus based, as well as post-secondary, and university, where the abstractions become extremely complicated. There's still a huge opportunity. So we work across all grade levels in math and science. And as an educator, I know for years how difficult it is just to pop new resources into my day-to-day. So each of our modules comes with a suite of services for fearless implementation. So pre and post assessments, lesson plans that show you exactly kind of based on what the data said, the different pathways you can take for re-engagement, follow-up practice that's not drill and kill and really kind of builds on the conceptual work while yielding procedural fluency. So the big takeaway here is that, you know, integrating VR is not something, it's not as simple as just popping the platform into your curriculum. The suite of content services that wraps around is really important. We serve K-12 schools, higher ed, as well as at-home learning, which has become so critical during this time where parents and students are looking for high quality instructional materials so that they can continue their learning. I wanted to pause there, and what's really important to us are the questions that came up as we gave you a little bit of a glimpse into the product, and we'd love to hear your initial reactions, comments, thoughts and questions. Emily, Jessica, of course, from you as well, but the rest of the time is dedicated to any questions the audience might have.
Great. I mean, I already have a few, of course, but I'm going to start with some of the ones that the teachers have chimed in with. One, I think you sort of answered, which is how do you go about choosing which lessons to adopt? You talked a little bit about bottleneck areas, maybe go into some more depth, and Ellie, you too chime in if there was any teacher input that came along with that.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been working in schools for 10 years. So anything that we chose was based on what we found with teachers, and everything is kind of inherently by teacher input. But to answer to the first part of your question, we really look at topics that just nationally have low data. Like that's the first step, is are these things that kids are struggling with? In the Algebra 1 curriculum, really building that understanding of how to go from exponential to logs is a very, very sticky point. They'll just kind of memorize the properties of logs. So that's something that we looked at. Anything that in the science curriculum that you can't see, so underlying phenomena, I mentioned Lenz's law in this particular presentation, Faraday's law, concepts that are so abstract that they cannot visualize it, and hence they just memorize. So I think by rule of thumb, you can think about any topic that kids tend to memorize because they really can't visualize or conceptualize that topic in a meaningful way using traditional methodologies.
Sorry, I muted myself. And so that actually segues nicely into the next question, which is about, is the algebra part of it mostly 2D? I think there was some confusion about like, what is the 3D nature? What's the VR, component of the algebra? And is that like less abstract? It's more just equation based? Yeah.
It's a great question. So in our algebra module, students are actually in a food hall, and they're going through experiences. So they get to pay for their food. There's somebody behind them that unfortunately coughs on them. And so they actually go through a full experience without any sort of color coding. They then, once the mayor, we have all of our modules have a very clear storyline. So then once the mayor says, hey, there's this outbreak, there's this, news flash, the mayor puts together a task force, then you go back to that initial physical experience you had, and it's all color coded to see that initial person when they coughed, how did it spread to you? And so you have a very visceral remembrance of what it was for that virus to spread, and you can kind of go back. Secondly, that's one part that's absolutely 3D. The second part is the physical models that we use to show spread are all 3-dimensional. So it's not a picture you're looking at, you're actually watching kind of the people movement, and they're very authentic. So what happens when you walk and you're sitting on a bench and you have your child or whatever it might be, you're watching these 3D experiences play out and you're seeing the virus spread. That's more passive. The first one is an active experience and the second one is passive, but they're both 3-dimensional. And then using that 3-dimensional model, you kind of do the one-to-one mapping and you start creating your table. Then using that table, you create your graph. But what's really important is to kind of be able to keep going back to that physical model to understand spread, because spread is 3D. Spread, you can create like a visualization of it, but spread actually comes from a very human experience.
Well, I don't think that you could be more timely than you are right now. It's definitely, I mean, as soon as we saw the coronaviruses, like unleash in your demo. Actually, you've done a really...
And the one thing I would add on to that, Jessica, since you mentioned it, like we look at 3 cases, right? So we look at when we weren't taking any precautions, what did the spread look like in your food hall? And no one's taking precautions. We don't have masks on. What did the spread look like? And the students physically see one person spreading to 10 people at a time. Then we show them with masks, with social distancing. Then we show them with social distancing and masks. The hope is that that very powerful association that you just now had, which was physical, will kind of help you remember something that's different from like watching Cuomo say it on the screen, which is lovely and he's wonderful, but just having a different type of association.
Yeah. So another thing that you mentioned just now was about the storytelling piece. And I think that that's very key to VR. And certainly many of the like very popular VR products are very narrative and maybe even experimental and film based. So one thing that came up in a previous session we did was just about the storytelling piece as being very integral to the implementation in the classroom. And I was wondering, Ellie, if you had any thoughts about how the average teacher might use this, like what is the role of storytelling in math? It seems like really avant-garde to me, but I want to hear more about like what, evidence you've seen of teachers doing this.
Absolutely. I think that is the whole heart of the curriculum that I have worked on, much with Anurupa's input and training and guidance. It's very much how students intuitively approach something. When you tell a story, students are not lost at moments. They can intuitively understand how do you get from A to B to C. And that arc helps them to make these connections that are lost so often in normal math instruction when you don't have something rooted in a very important and compelling context. And that's told with a very simple but very intriguing story for kids. I found that the most successful lessons I have ever taught have always been rooted in a very rich and interesting context with a very strong storyline. Kids are then able to very clearly articulate what they understood and how it applies to their own life, which is and a huge way for them to be prepared to go into college and beyond.
It makes a lot of sense. 2 other questions, or 3, actually, another one just popped in. One is, are you planning modules for elementary grades?
Yeah, so right now the focus is middle school, high school, and college. I think that there's a huge opportunity in elementary as well. And so based on how the pilots go at the middle school level, we'll have more information around what's the best way to engage some of our younger students. So yes, that's in the pipeline.
And then a really specific question, I'm just going to read it verbatim so you hear it. When do you choose to let the user become the phenomenon itself, such as becoming a piece of the magnetic brakes in the spinning disc? An even bigger question, have you played with how scale can affect the understanding of the concepts here?
It's a fantastic question. It's really a design question. Absolutely. I think we're for this physics module, there is a part of it that you can actually go and become like to the scaling question. You can kind of see the braking system from a different perspective. I think one thing that's going to be really important for us to understand is how valuable that is for different types of students. So more than anything else, there'll be a lot of choice. It's almost like pick your adventure. If that perspective is really helpful to you, you can use that perspective. If what's more perspective is really the observational and the different trials, then you can use that. So one of the things that will really come out in our pilot is what are the different ways in which students sense make, who gravitate towards what, and how can we optimize such that you can use a sense making mechanism, or in this case, perspective, that is most intuitive for you.
Another audience question. She's very curious about some of the user testing and challenges that came up. And so maybe both of you guys could talk to that too, if you've done any testing at all, Ellie, with your students, maybe remotely or if, prior to going on lockdown?
Unfortunately, we haven't started. Our user testing with students is going to begin in September. So I'd love to, and Ellie, we would love to share then. But as of right now, we've been doing a lot of more basic user testing just to make sure that it is working technically and operating in the way that we'd like it to. So we're still quite early.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about your timeline? When can we try it? And also like where you're at and what are the modules? So you developed the physics one, you're working on algebra, designing algebra, kind of what your timeline looks like and when you're going to be looking for teachers to get their hands on this to give you feedback.
Yeah, A, we would love feedback. B, we are going to be launching algebra in September. The fun thing about the algebra module, in the way that Ellie and I have designed it, is that it can be used in Algebra 1. So if you're an 8th grade Algebra 1 teacher, a 9th grade Algebra 1 teacher, you can use it to teach exponential functions. If you're an Algebra 2 teacher, you can use it to teach log functions, because all we do is use the relationship we've built up for time versus number of infections. We help students see the inverse, where if you want to actually figure out the number of weeks until we run out of beds, you need to use a log function. So I'm getting into the narrative specifics, but you can actually use it for 11th and 12th grade math as well. So on that note, we'll be able to start testing across Algebra 1, Algebra 2 starting in September. So if you're interested, please reach out, and we'd love to send you a headset and get this in front of your kids and of course yourself.
Well, that's a huge offer, because I know in some of the other sessions it's come up how hard it is to get a hold of a headset. So like even just right there, that's an amazing offer.
Yeah, so the NSF is supporting our project right now, and I set aside a good amount of resources to order a lot of headsets for teachers. And so those are collecting dust because I've been ordering them over time. So again, as Jessica mentioned, we are really excited to get this out. And so I'm happy to bring it over, mail it to you so you can start testing it with your kids and seeing how they like it and how we can make it better.
Have you had to adapt what you thought you'd be doing in the fall at all to the uncertain scenarios around distance learning or remote learning? Like, how did your product play into in-person versus remote?
Yeah, so luckily, and Ellie, please jump in because we've talked a lot about this. Our product actually requires very little adjustment, whether you're using it at home or in the classroom. When I say very little, I mean none. It's a student-led, it's like a task. So in the way that you would give your students a task and you'd have them work on it, they can work on that task in a classroom, they can work on it at home. So it hasn't changed or affected our plans at all. The big difference is, of course, the way in which teachers are watching kids go through it. So now there's a distance element to that, but you have status indicators at all times around what kids are working on, what they're struggling with. So instead of being able to go and kind of poke them, you can actually interrupt their module and you can have a conversation with them. And so there's no change to the product. It's just everything you would do in person, you have to now do it remotely.
And how exactly do teachers assess what the students have learned in these modules?
So there are a lot of built-in assessments already. As I mentioned, there are lots of checks for understanding as we go, but there is a final check for understanding that allows kids to submit their responses. Ellie, if you want to talk a little bit more about the assessments too, because from a teaching perspective, you and I had a lot of chats about what it means to have formative assessments as well as summative assessments, while not relying too heavily on the summative assessments.
Definitely. I think part of our work has really been rethinking what assessments look like. And so when we create assessments for kids, we have some that are on paper, we have some that are in the module. All of that is in an effort to make kids holistically, they're very strong in the concept no matter what medium they're working on. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what are the types of questions that kids must understand in the module, and how can we effectively assess that, and how can we assess it in a way where teachers are really given a lot of insight depending on which answer kids are choosing. So we think very carefully whether they're multiple choice or open response questions, whether they're deep conceptual questions or more procedural fluency. We actually spend quite a bit of time on the assessment because we know that teacher understanding of where exactly each student is so important to being able to make sure that student masters that concept.
Emily, I've been hogging all the questions. I don't know if you have some that you have to burning questions for yourself as a fellow product developer.
Fellow product developer, oh, for sure. I guess, I mean, how can a teacher get already like signed up for is there like somewhere they can sign up? How do they contact you? Do you have a list somewhere?
Yeah. So right now we have a really great and long list of pilot partners. So if you want to get on that pilot list and get a headset in September and start working with your kids, you can email me. Let me make sure that I have my email address here. Just email us and we can put you on the list. In terms of timeline, we'll be launching the algebra module in September. We'll be launching the full physics module in October. And then in the spring, we're going to be moving into modules in calculus, modules in geometry, and then modules in middle school math and science. So if any of these subjects are subjects that you teach and you'd want to explore this, just shoot me an email and I will get you on the list so that you can be a part of the pilot.
Cool, great. And I think you already told us a little bit, but what headset is it compatible with? Is it the Oculus Quest primarily? Are you going to do others? Are you thinking of others, or is it just for now focused on Oculus?
You know, and I think that that's something that we would probably get more clarity on through the pilot. Right now, we run on the Oculus Quest, as I mentioned, for the interactivity, so that you don't have an umbilical cord. For those of you who use the Quest, you're not connected to a piece of hardware. But we also want to be nimble, and so if you have a Google Cardboard, you can watch all of the tasks and have the narrative and the storyline. All of that is still possible in the Google Cardboard. I think, Emily, we're going to have to think more deeply as if beyond that we're going to need to offer other hardware options. But right now it's just the Oculus Quest and the Google Cardboard based on what you're able to afford.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I have a question that I've asked every one of our guests, and I hope you have a chance, you have, something to add to it. I'm always just really curious about the kind of relationship between the product developer and the educator. And Anurupa, you're a particular type, which is that you are an educator who now is product developer. But I'm just curious, like, how that's gone between you and Ellie and maybe other teachers that you've worked with. Like, what's the benefits for these to really work together to build something?
Ellie, I'm going to really ask you to jump in here, and based on what I say, you'll know probably what you want to jump on because we talked about this so much. I think that I've been working in curriculum development for years now. Ellie and I and my team at Success, we developed a really rich problem-based, project-based math, physics, computer science, engineering curriculum. And though it was so rich, teachers really struggled because they weren't a part of the construction of it. They weren't a part of thinking through what they wanted for their children. And they would look at the problems we would create and like, wow, this is great. This is cool, Anurupa. But there was some reticence. And so I think a very, very large part of the rollout is going to be how this really becomes a part of the teacher's vernacular and they make it their own. And there's so much flexibility built in. Again, because we were teachers, I knew exactly what I wanted to get. I didn't want something that was baked, that someone had just kind of like totally pre-programmed. I wanted optionality. I know my kids, they really want to do X. Oh, great, there's that option to do X, right? So having that type of optionality is very important, and really partnering with educators to listen to them and listen to what agency means for them and what needs to be inherently built in to allow that kind of agency has been a big part of our process. But Ellie, I'd love for you to jump in on this question because I think it's an important one in a time where there are no dearth of resources, and yet teachers really kind of struggle to just like pick things up off the shelf and teach it in their classrooms.
Definitely. I think that teaching these rich and exciting lessons sounds so great and everyone wants to do it, but they're very, very difficult to facilitate. And you have to have a very authentic, to Anurupa's point earlier about when you're not necessarily a part of the construction process, it can be difficult to find yourself in a place where you are so excited that your kids are so on board. And I think both of us are tied together by this vision of making kind of what seems to be impossible in a classroom so possible through a very simple but so intuitive story that kids literally step into And it also shows teachers what are their kids interested in. It provides them with a better understanding of their own students through using these platforms. And I think that that is so valuable. And yeah, I feel like I have learned so much from Anurupa as her, as working with her. But the educator's opinion and ideas in this are so valuable. It's ultimately about creating a product that works for every student as well as every teacher. And so it's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of the relationship and building the product.
That's such a great point that you made, that, you know, curriculum itself is a product, and oftentimes it's made without the teacher's input as it is, even if it's just, you know, written words on a page, you know, telling you what to do. So in a way, it's not, I mean, it's radical to involve the teacher in any kind of, you know, work that's being done. And so it's really impressive, and I think crucial to the success of this product and others, you know, in the classroom, is to like really get teachers involved. And Ellie, I love what you said about, you know, really the benefit of using these technologies is that you get to know your kids so much better based on what they're doing. And that is the very work of a teacher. So, you know, I think we've even more than ever discovered that like, you know, those relationships and that understanding of like who the kids are and how they learn and what they're engaged by has been really brought up a lot in the past few months. And it's one of my wishes that it's something that sticks around, that's a real priority to figure out like what really engages kids. You know, we're coming up on time. No, go ahead.
One last point to that. I think this will also really help. One of the things I have said for a long time now is that the teacher's role is impossible. When I was a teacher, I had no idea how I was going to do all the things that were expected of me. And the North Star for my entire team as we've been developing this is, how do we make teachers truly be able to do the work of a teacher in a day? So you're not trying to figure out the most interesting problems, because there are great engineers and physicists and people that have figured out great problems, right? Like maybe if you're spending all your time developing the problem, you have less time to listen to your students. You have less time to give kids feedback. You have less time to listen and see what's working and step in at the most strategic time to help them on their way. And so a lot of the teachers, the point I'll end on is all the teachers that I've been working with and talking with, they say, Anurupa, I can't wait for this product because it's going to allow me to really feel like a teacher and not just be running around all day kind of doing these a million other things. VR is best at teaching Lenz's law, because it is very difficult for you to fly around with your right hand rules and draw magnetic fields. Like, there are some teachers that do it well, but VR is equipped to do that. What a teacher is an expert in is his or her students, how to really listen to students and guide thinking and guide inquiry. And so that's just one thing I wanted to add in. I feel like it will really help teachers focus on the things that they love to do most.
Well, you're already getting some really great feedback just in the chat. Both, you know, the last two comments, or three comments are, you know, looks fantastic. It's so hard to find something for math. I think, you know, zeroing in on these bottleneck problems, like you said, it's like teachers' time is so valuable. So like address the things that are really critical and get to go deep with it. And then, of course, the use of storytelling to engage learners. I think that's a brilliant approach, and the tactile nature of VR is such an interesting storytelling medium that we're just on the precipice of, and it's really exciting. Well, I just want to thank you guys for coming today. You know, your contact information is up. I've shared it in the Q&A as well in response, because one teacher was already like, how do I get my headset? So I immediately shot him
You're going to be selling headsets now.
You are.
You said too much. You said, I have headsets to give out. This is like, be careful.
Yeah. Holy grail.
But it's a great idea, though. It's a great idea that you can do that.
Yeah. And I can tell you, you've really captured the attention of the teachers, the sort of champion early adopter teachers we have here. And I think it can really scale to all math and science teachers. So thanks again for coming today. You know, as we said at the beginning, we're going to have a recording of this. It's going to be available on the registration website. The link to that is in the chat right now. You can actually save the chat if you're interested in, you know, retaining that information. This is the last one we have scheduled for right now, but we're hoping to do more. We really want to build this, you know, champion teacher community around VR and education. So teachers, if you have ideas for other topics, feel free to email Emily or I. our content. You can just reach us right through the Zoe website. And anyway, it was really nice to see you guys again. And thanks, Ellie, for coming. Thanks, Anarupa. And Emily, thank you for inviting me to co-host these.
Thank you so much for doing this, Jess. And, congrats on what you're doing with your work. And especially excited for September to be able to try that out.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to echo that again, Jessica, Emily, thank you for organizing this. There aren't a lot of champions right now. This is so considered into the future. And for those of us who are in the work, it's not the future, it's the present. And so building this cadre of people that can really see and can galvanize a community around teaching with VR and teaching with immersive, rich tools. I think that there's so much potential here. So thank you for putting this together and for leading this effort. And to all the teachers and educators in the audience, please email me. We're so excited to get this out and change the way kids' perception of math and change the way kids learn math. And it all starts and ends with you as their leader and educator in the classroom. So please reach out if you want to just talk or if you'd like to use the product, of course.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. See you soon.